Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today at the UN House in Trinidad and Tobago for the launch of the One UN Caribbean website. Today with us, we have Mr. Richard Lewitt, Resident Coordinator and Resident Representative for Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, Curacao, and St. Martin. Also, we have three young people with us to discuss the work that they have done in different areas of development, particularly in gender equality, environment, and achieving peace. Today, we are joined by Khadija Sinanan, who is an attorney at law, co-founder of Womantra, as well as a Woman Deliver Young Leader. Alexander Girvan is the sustainability coordinator of the New Fire Festival and in environmental economics, who has worked in mainstream ecosystem service considerations in development planning. Also, we're joined by Rianne Pert, who works at the United Nations Development Program in peace and security. Thank you for joining us today. Great, so now I will hand over to Mr. Richard Lewitt, who will deliver the opening remarks.
Great, thank you very much, Warren. So, what's the purpose of this new website? The UN Caribbean website serves the purpose of facilitating access to information for all stakeholders in the region. It will include different materials, including games, podcasts, webinars, and sustainable development goals related publications. The One UN Caribbean website allows for one central location for information and updates on UN developments for the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean. The website provides the UN agencies across the region with a platform to convey their messages and showcase their work. In reaching a regional audience through the website, efforts are put into innovative and creative tools and ways to communicate, including online webinars, contests, games, and podcasts involving a whole range of sustainable development actors working in the Caribbean, as manifested in our panel here today. Innovation and creativity will also come from the emphasis on visually appearing content and the use of infographics. Based on the UN's communication capacity assessment, the website has been designed and will be self-sufficient as possible to promote sustainability and relevance in time. At the heart of the website is a concept called the Multi-Country Sustainable Development Framework. This has been developed by the United Nations system with the governments in the region and regional bodies to identify the key regional and development priorities for the Caribbean and agree how we're going to work together to deliver them in relationship particularly to the Sustainable Development Goals. The Multi-Country Sustainable Development Framework has four elements: a healthy Caribbean, a safe and just Caribbean, a sustainable and resilient Caribbean, and an inclusive and equitable and prosperous Caribbean. I'm really pleased to be connected to this panel of young, dynamic Caribbean thinkers and look forward to them giving substance to the launch of the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. This morning I was asked to focus on one of the UN MSDF's strategic areas, creating an inclusive, equitable, and prosperous Caribbean, which is a massive thing, encompassing very many goals. So I will try to focus on that, of course, with a particular look at gender inequality and gender equity. But as well, I think it would be difficult to have that conversation in the context of gender without talking a little bit about another one of the strategic areas, which is a healthy Caribbean. So provided time works, I will try and touch on that. In preparing for this session, I was reading through the draft UN MSDF, and I understood one of the core concepts to be, I think it was also a core concept of the SDGs, leaving no one behind. And it's a particularly timely and key message because it's central to the work that we do when we look at gender inequality. It seems obvious enough, but it can very easily be taken for granted because you're dealing with different Caribbean states, and even within Trinidad and Tobago, different classes of people with very different experiences. So it's something that we have at the top of our minds in working at any point in time. Regionally, there are a myriad of gender justice and gender inequality issues that face the women and girls of Caribbean countries. It's way too much for me to even attempt to address in this session. some of those that connect, I think, across inclusive, equitable, and prosperous Caribbeans, but also healthy Caribbeans, are those that treat with sexual and reproductive health and rights, which have often been an area of rights that have been left behind in the narrative when we talk about the rights of women and girls. There has not been as popular of a conversation about abortion rights, nor has there been as much of a conversation about access to contraceptives. And where those conversations do exist, they tend to kind of remain centralized at higher levels, at governmental levels, at the ministries of health, but they often don't transcend into real action and real solutions for women, and particularly young, poor women on the ground. And these are just a few of the areas of concern. If states are serious about achieving any of these lofty SDGs that are, you know, infographic and very nicely designed every decade or so, governments really need to commit to paying attention to these issues on the ground and to working with persons and young people on the ground in understanding what the issues are and how we can actually create pragmatic solutions. I also want to mention, in addition to abortion rights, the rates of maternal and infant mortality. These are just, again, a few of the myriad of issues that that feminists and other non-profit organizations are trying to treat it on a daily basis. And resources such as the website can really come in handy in centralizing that type of information that can make your work easier. In preparation for this, again, I attempted to go through the Caribbean Multi-Country Assessment, which is a very thorough document, and I was impressed with it. I kind of just picked out the gender parts, to be honest, but it was very helpful. And within that document, there was one sentence which identified the successes of women in tertiary education in the region has often overshadowed the situation of the majority of women who are still a part of the working poor. And I thought that to be a very, very apt statement, as many people and very often governments assume and believe that more women in UE, more girls in UE equals no gender equality, because women are surpassing men. There has been this very much fear-mongering argument that is perpetuated amongst male-dominated governments very often, that girls outperforming boys, and this is a national tragedy. Beyond that being ridiculous, it also ignores completely a huge population of women who are not a part of this, you know, advanced middle-class conversation about tertiary education and are still grappling with basic access issues and health and services issues. So we can't take one advance in one area and use that, hold that up as the flag for success. And, you know, we're in a post-gender inequality world, not so. And it's something to note. That reality, of course, this post-gender inequality world could not be further from the truth. And a quick skim through the daily newspapers of any Caribbean country gleans a very different picture. And it's not even something I need to elaborate on. We're all very familiar with the rates of sexual violence and gender-based. 2 minutes. To wrap up very quickly, one of the areas that the organization I work with right now, Womantra, is engaged with is in child marriage. And the way we're doing this is through a coalition of 18 organizations. And I thought it particularly relevant to mention that is because child marriage, first of all, it exists in Trinidad and Tobago. It's legal. Girls as young as 12 years old can be legally married in Trinidad and Tobago. And contrary to popular belief, it is happening. 529 girls were married in the past 10 years. So in a bid to change the laws before the end of the year, 18 CSOs and NGOs with very different leanings and very different strategic ideas came together and created a campaign, and it's ongoing. I found that particularly relevant to today's discussion because this website is all about bringing different sources together. And if it is one thing I realized from doing this work, you cannot make a meaningful difference without engaging critically with the key stakeholders. All those who are interested in any areas of human rights, whether we're on very different sides of the table, whether it's LGBT and I work in a whole different area, right? We need to come together and pool resources to make a difference. And I can say that this website will most certainly make those efforts easier. And I find the approaches taken by it so far most encouraging. So I encourage everyone who has watched the video, to go out and take a look at it, and also, you know, tweet a little something about amending the marriage laws, because it's something we need to get done before the end of the year. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexander Gervan, and I'm here today to talk about a sustainable and resilient Caribbean. The first idea in that sustainability talks about how we do things moving forward. And the resilient element speaks about how we prepare for many changes which are essentially inevitable. Now, under the SDGs, there are four core ecological goals. 15, which is life on land, 14, which is life underwater, 13, which deals with climate change, and number 6, which deals with clean water. Now, today I'm just going to briefly talk about the SDGs almost as well as two structures. The first being a pyramid, and these 4 ecological SDGs really underpin the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The environment is rightfully at the base of this pyramid. The vast majority of our well-being, our prosperity, and our wealth is derived from ecological resources and ecological wealth. And our biggest threats to prosperity, to equality, to peace, to prosperity, as I said before, are related to threats which are environmental. So speaking about our natural capital stocks and our ecosystem service flows, which primarily are in the Caribbean, our forest and our water. So in the Caribbean, tourism is essentially underpinned almost completely by ecological resources. Our beaches, our seas, and our forests are really what draw people to us. So if we're not preserving these resources, all of the other goals are essentially threatened. And to use climate change as a kind of overarching umbrella, when we're facing things like sea level rise, this threatens our beaches. Without beaches, we have no tourism. These threaten our ports. Ports under water cannot facilitate our economies, and our economies rely heavily on ports. And then, of course, hurricanes, which is coming back to the idea of resilience. These ecological resources and these threats are threats to our security because they affect inequality. And there are actually as well threats to gender issues. If you look at peace and security, and I'm sorry if I'm straying into your area, economic inequality is what we think about right now. But with climate change, inequality in access to resources such as water are even more scary. It's one thing if you're arguing over how you consume, it's another thing if you argue over your water, which is essential to our very existence. I think to essentially close, we think of it as a pyramid building on ecological base, but we can also think of it as a lighthouse which we are driving towards. The UN is very clear that the SDGs are indivisible. They cannot be cherry-picked, and they're all correlated. They're all interrelated, and we do not think of it as a holistic framework, as this pyramid, but as well as this lighthouse that we're driving towards. Then we have serious problems. In moving in our activities and environment and gender, we have to think about how all of these things are interrelated, and that really is of the SDGs as a framework. So I thank you very much, and I look forward to the conversation afterward.
Like my colleagues, I have the pleasure of working in my own region. I think that's an utmost pleasure. And today I will briefly talk about the topic, a safe, cohesive, and just Caribbean, as he mentioned, and particularly how I've been contributing to that broader goal in my role as a staff member at the UN. I think if we look at the Caribbean, it is actually not to be confronted with all the challenges related to crime and insecurity. We turn the TV on and it's there. We're seeing statistics having to do with the Caribbean region, has one of the highest murder rates. We move forward the newspapers on the very front, slash there, we see the incidents of murder, of gender-based violence, as my colleague mentioned here, be it Jamaica, be it Trinidad and Tobago, be it in St. Lucia, wherever you go. And we also see statistics that talk about only 46% of Caribbean citizens actually feel safe in their countries. And this suggests that the figures are real and the challenges are real. Understanding, of course, they manifest quite differently at country level. But even with these challenges, we have to, as Caribbean people, find a way to flip that script, to change that narrative, and to look at the positives in Caribbean society, to be able to identify some of the more credible solutions that can put people at the center of development, to be able to find that as a means to push a culture that can promote what we're trying to do here, which is to have a more safe, cohesive, and just Caribbean. Yesterday, I was in a meeting and someone said that hope is not a strategy, and I fully concur. What is required is concrete action and action on the part of everyone. Richard mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. Actually, all my colleagues mentioned the SDGs. And I believe that this offers a channel towards this particular vision. The UN MSDF in particular is aligned with the SDGs. And in that context, my work is also grounded in that framework. If we reflect a little bit on the Caribbean, the threats that we see here to security they do not appear in a vacuum. They exist in environments that have social vulnerabilities, economic vulnerabilities, institutional vulnerabilities that give rise to a whole host of different risks. We also know that much of the crime that happens here is as a result of limited opportunities for a large section of the society. And UNDP has been for some time promoting this concept of citizen security. And it's part of the broader human security notion. And it speaks to a situation where people should be free to enjoy their fundamental rights and their ensured safety and security. In layman's terms, they should be free from any kind of violence or even the fear of violence. And this agenda recognizes that it is important to strengthen the justice and security systems, but this is not enough. This is not sufficient. Sustainable change also requires addressing the root causes of the problems and adopting more preventative approaches to doing so. And it comes with first understanding the context in which we're working, the vulnerabilities, the risk factors, as I mentioned before, widening the opportunities that people have, the employment opportunities, looking at education, both mentioned that, but not just the reach, but the quality of that education as well. Reducing poverty, marginalization, and promoting, very importantly, gender equality. When we talk about promoting a just Caribbean, we recognize that it is not sufficient to just provide justice services, but that these services must be accessible and effective in providing remedies for grievances. And the justice systems, they must be able and they must equally protect and promote the rights of the rich and of the poor, the marginalized and the exploited. But let me return a bit to how I started in terms of asking the question, how do we flip the script? What is required in order to do that? And we know from our experiences that no amount of hard policing at all, you could put all the police on the street, that will not result in sustainable security in our region. We know this. But we also know, and if we're honest with ourselves, we do know that addressing the challenge is not something that somebody else must do. It is something that we all have to do. Each person within the Caribbean has to play that role. Citizens must decide that, hey, this is not good enough. And they must engage in problem solving. They must reclaim the true meaning of a safe, cohesive, and just Caribbean. They should work in partnership with the state agencies. And importantly, the government should create the avenues and the opportunities for them to do this. And at the same time, the government retains the primary responsibility for ensuring the safety, the livelihoods, and the dignity of your citizens. And steps should be taken, concrete steps should be taken to strengthen the institutions to ensure that they are responsive to the needs of people. And once again, opening up these opportunities for people so that they can actually move on to live fulfilling lives. As my colleague here mentioned, the responses to crime and insecurity in the region are not just goals. It's not just about security and justice. they cut across, you know, be it goal 1 on poverty, goal 4 on education, gender equality, goal 5, goal 17 on partnerships. So therefore, we can no longer work in silos. We can't work pretty much just on a sectorial level. You have to look at the multidimensional aspects and how everything relates to each other. And also importantly, when we look at the role of the UN system, of UNDP, of any of the UN agencies, they have a very key role in supporting countries to make this vision of a safe and secure Caribbean come to life. And in particular, the UN works with several institutions and actors that play a role in providing security and justice. We strive to strengthen national systems for the promotion and protection of citizen security, justice, human rights, and to build safe and secure communities. We also work to improve the participation of citizens, their voice, and their accountability. And we support the equitable delivery of justice and security services. We recognize, and the point was made by all my colleagues, about partnerships and how partnerships are important to achieving the set goals and the targets within the SDGs, as well as the national priorities, and be partnerships with the private sector, with the international community, or with civil society. Because only together, working in partnerships, can we successfully address the problems. Only together can we find sustainable solutions, and only together can we flip the script towards a safer and more secure Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rianne. Now we will view the website itself. Here it is. We have the homepage of the website. As you can see, the United Nations Caribbean website has several sections, including About Us, Our Work, the 2030 Agenda, Resources, New Center, and Contact. So on the right-hand banner, you can see our priority areas: an inclusive, equitable, and prosperous Caribbean, a healthy Caribbean, a safe and just Caribbean, and a sustainable and resilient Caribbean. As we go lower into the page, you can also see our core publications, the Twitter panel on the right-hand side, as well as the latest news of the UN across the English and Dutch Caribbean. At the bottom of the page, you will see the icons, the logos of all of our agencies across the region, as well as the links to our social media: Facebook, Flickr, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram accounts. Next, in resources, here we can find all of the UN publications that relate to the multi-dimensional framework. We also have webinars for the Caribbean Future Forum dialogues, as well as related links include all of the country websites across the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean, the websites for different governments that are included in this, as well as for partners such as the academic institutions, University of Belize, Suriname, and Guyana. Here in publications, we can find the documents our speakers may have reference to, including the CMCA towards a Caribbean multi-country assessment, the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals, the regional document, as well as other documents relating to the SDGs, the Samoa Pathway. Under the contacts page, we can also find the contact information for all of the UN offices across and Dutch-speaking Caribbean. This ends our viewing of the website.